You're listening to the Voice of Russia in London. I'm Daniel Cinna. The British government's plans to protect the public from dog attacks is woefully inadequate, according to a group of MPs. The Environment, Food and Rural Affairs Committee say more needs to be done urgently against dog-related antisocial behaviour. Ministers want to bring in compulsory microchipping for every dog owner in England by 2016. They may also close a legal loophole so that dog owners could be prosecuted over an attack by their dog on private land. But the Environment Committee say the government's proposals failed to respond adequately to the issue, and the proposals were far too limited. So with around 210,000 people attacked by dogs every year in England alone, has the government gone far enough to protect the public from dog attacks? Joining me for today's discussion is Stan Rawlinson, one of Britain's leading dog behaviourists and also an obedience trainer. Trevor Cooper is a legal consultant for the Dogs Trust. Ali Green is the founder of DDA Watch, who support fair and effective dog laws. Dave Joyce is National Health, Safety and Environment Officer for the Communication Workers Union. And he's also the leader of their Bite Back campaign, tackling dog attacks on postmen and women. We're also joined on the phone by Paul, who's been convicted under the Dangerous Dogs Act. We'll begin with Trevor Cooper, legal consultant for the Dogs Trust. Do you think the government plans were woefully inadequate?
I wouldn't go that far. It's a good start. We certainly warmly welcome compulsory microchipping. We agree with Section 3 of the Act being extended to cover all places, subject to exemptions. But frankly, we wish that it had gone further insofar as we would like to see breed-specific legislation gone, and we'd like to see the introduction of dog control notices.
Ali Green from DDA Watch.
Hi, yeah, we feel that, again, like the Dogs Trust, the breed-specific element should be repealed, but we feel that the legislation is still too late. We're doing very little to make sure that these incidents don't occur in the first place, and rather we're dealing with them afterwards, and we feel that more focus should be given to people before they buy a dog and before they breed a dog.
Dan Rawlinson, a dog behaviourist.
Yes, I agree with part of what they're suggesting. I'm also really against BSL, breed-specific legislation, for a number of reasons. I won't go into that at this moment in time. I do agree of the extension to dangerously out of control in a private place rather than a public place, because a lot of people get bitten under those circumstances. And I also believe in the microchipping. I think that's an excellent start.
Dave Joyce from the Communication Workers Union.
Well, certainly we welcome DEFRA's announcement. It's been a long time coming, but unfortunately it falls short of what we wanted to hear. And obviously let's not forget that this is a repeat of the announcement made by this minister's predecessor a year earlier. And of course we've had a number of false dawns and announcements and statements along the way, going right back to April 2010, when I secured a personal assurance from the Prime Minister David Cameron that they would make the changes that they're now just talking about. Our number one objective has been to secure the extension of the legislation to private places, and our Bite Back campaign we launched in 2007-2008 has obviously been at the forefront of getting changes to the laws in Scotland, in Northern Ireland and Wales, and of course Westminster have been sadly trailing a long way behind. So
Sure, and let's also hear from Paul, who's been convicted under the Dangerous Dogs Act. What do you think of the government's new plans?
I think at the end of the day, the owner is ultimately responsible. I don't think enough's been done legally at all. I don't know why they ever got rid of having dog licences.
Let's hear from Trevor Cooper, legal consultant for the Dogs Trust. What powers do enforcement authorities have, and what extra powers if the law does go through?
If the powers that are proposed are changed, they specifically relate though to England, and that is proposing that Section 3 of the Dangerous Dogs Act is extended. So at the moment it only covers incidents of a dog being dangerously out of control if the incident takes place in a public place or a non-public place where the dog isn't permitted to be. And the proposal is that it should apply to anywhere, so wherever the incident has taken place. But if it's on private lands, the suggestion is there should be an exemption if the victim was present unlawfully. And we fully support that exemption. We certainly don't want the law to prosecute a dog owner just because their dog has chased off a burglar. That would be preposterous. But for us, the other flagship policy is microchipping. Government's announced that all dogs should be microchipped from the 6th of April 2016, and we warmly embrace that proposal. We think it does promote responsible dog ownership and makes it far more likely that a stray dog will go back home.
It's obviously also worth noting that you offer free chipping events at some of your 18 homes. If we also now go to to Ali Green from DDA Watch. The government have been accused of tinkering with this legislation and not really overhauling it. Do you agree, and what have they missed out on?
Yeah, to a degree. The biggest problem we've got at the moment is you can speak to people on the street that have dogs, like Paul. Was he aware of the legislation before he found himself caught up in it? And most people don't know. They don't know that it's a fear of injury that can get you in trouble. The dog doesn't have to do anything. They're not aware of all the legalities regarding what is a pit bull type. They just don't know. So the way we've got it at the moment is your dog can do something or your dog can look a certain way, and then we're going to come down on you like a ton of bricks. Anybody that owns a dog should be aware of the laws relating to that dog. They should be aware of their responsibilities. But we don't do anything to enforce that and make sure that happens before they even own a dog. And that's where the government's coming unstuck. We can keep telling people off every time a dog attacks, but until we do something to actually make people come up in line with the good responsible owners, which the vast majority are, then we're always going to have this problem. Nothing will improve at all.
Obviously, a lot of the dogs which are accused under the Dangerous Dogs Act and various other acts, some of them are then put down. Stan Rawlins said, can you change a dog's behaviour once it has been trained to be vicious?
According to the government, you can't, because they brought in 1991 BSL, breed-specific legislation. Now, to my mind, that is eugenics. And eugenics basically is a concept that's intrinsically flawed. Training, socialisation and behavioural manipulation does cause changes in behaviour. That's a fact. That'd be redundant if that was not the case. To state that nurture, socialisation and education and training has no impact on any individual or animal must surely be wrong.
Paul, where does that leave you as an owner who was convicted under the DDA?
What I was say was the incident I was involved in. I was quietly walking along the road with my dogs. They were on leads. I am a responsible owner. I don't let my dogs off the lead in a public place. They don't go around slavering and snapping at people. There was a parked car on the pavement. I was walking through a narrow gap. Somebody ran up behind me screaming and shouting and pushed me out of the way. The dog reacted. Unfortunately, the dog bit. Now, that dog was under medication at the time. It was on steroids and painkillers for cysts between its toes, which wouldn't have helped matters much. Now, what I'd like to say, you've got a dog behaviourist there. What are the chances of somebody jumping out behind a dog, making a big noise and spooking it? What are the chances of that dog reacting?
Dogs bite if they're startled quite a lot. People come round the corner, people suddenly face them, they might be wearing a hat, umbrella, whatever, and it could spook that dog, and if that dog is fearful in any way, can react with a bite.
Exactly, and that was my argument at the time. I was the one that rang the police and informed of the incident. I openly went to the police, hands up. I explained everything what had happened, and the police treated me like I'd gone out and stalked somebody and done it on purpose.
If we look at BSL, which obviously you are concerned with, the government doesn't seem at any time soon to want to end BSL.
During the Second World War, the Nazis did this to a group of people that they said were intrinsically inferior or bad. That was the most hideous thing on God's earth. My personal belief, this is eugenics in the same name. Isn't it strange that we're moving to the fact of putting dogs onto a register and saying that that dog, just because of what breed it is intrinsically bad? That can't be right. We're saying that that's like saying one group of people or one race of people are intrinsically bad. That can't be right, and it is definitely wrong and it's flawed, and it flies in the face of all behavioural knowledge.
Dave Joyce, do you want to come in there from the Communication Workers Union?
Certainly. I think that as far as the Communication Workers Union is concerned, we are opposed to BSL. Singling out 4 breeds was the first big mistake in the 1991 Act, and although the rest may have sounded good at the time, it achieved nothing, and of course dog attacks increased as the years went by and the Act was ineffective. And as far as our members are concerned, of course CW represents the largest group of victims, but we don't support BSL. Any dog can be aggressive in the hands of a bad owner, and that's what we're talking about. What's on the other end of the lead? Bad ownership is the problem here. The lack of care, welfare, training, socialisation. Postal workers are attacked by every breed and sundry. I myself used to breed and show English Bull Terriers, and in fact we bred a Crufts Champion as well, and I currently have a Staffordshire Bull Terrier pet. None of my dogs have ever bitten anyone. They were brilliant dogs, each and every one of them, and love them to bits.
A reminder that you're listening to The Voice of Russia in London. I'm Daniel Cinna. Joining me for today's discussion is Stan Rawlinson, one of Britain's leading dog behaviourists. Trevor Cooper is from the Dogs Trust. Ali Green is from DDA Watch. Dave Joyce is from the Communication Workers Union. We're also joined on the phone by Paul, who's been convicted under the Dangerous Dogs Act. Trevor Cooper from the Dogs Trust, what are your thoughts about Dave Joyce's idea of dog control orders?
Yeah, absolutely. We've been pressing the government to introduce dog control notices. They've already got them in Scotland, they've got them in Northern Ireland. The Welsh Government has done a draft bill to suggest that they should be brought in there. It's only the Westminster Government that so far hasn't embraced them. We do think we should be looking at prevention rather than just always looking at punishment.
One of the Dogs Trust's main resources is education, one of the key resources at your disposal. But some people might say, how effective is education? Would you like to see the government going down more of the education route rather than legislation?
It's one of those things governments actually struggle to achieve, is promoting responsible dog ownership. So Dogs Trust, we take our responsibility very seriously. So we do put a lot of time and effort and resources into education, which we think is absolutely key, and we'll continue to do so. We've already got 12 full-time education officers. We're hoping to expand that in the course of the coming year as well. So we'll continue with the work that we do, but in the meantime, there does need to be something in place between having a dog and then ultimately the dog injuring somebody. If the dog is showing aggressive tendencies, so it's becoming a nuisance, it's being aggressive, but not aggressive enough to warrant a conviction, then we would like an option for a dog control notice to be served, basically to mark the owner's card, to tell them what they should be doing in the future to look after their dog, maybe getting it trained, maybe getting themselves trained so they understand the dog's needs and how to look after it, maybe having the dog on a lead, maybe having it neutered, maybe having it muzzled, but all of those things can be considered. It's an option to get in early before it gets out of hand. And unfortunately, as I say, the Westminster government so far hasn't followed the dog control notice route.
Ali Green from DDA Watch, you're nodding your head there.
I am, yeah. I mean, I do kind of agree with the dog control notices in that when there is an issue, we do need to do something about it before that becomes a bigger issue. But the problem we've still got at the moment is, quite simply, if I would like a dog, I can go and get one. I can get whatever dog I want. If I want to breed my dog, I can do that. I can crossbreed, I can do it. You know, it's a free-for-all. And if you compare it to, say, driving, if we turn around to, at the moment to drive, you have to go through a test, you have to have a licence, you have to have it taxed, you know, all of that. But if we turn around tomorrow and said, right, as of tomorrow, we don't need any of those things anymore. If you want to go forth and drive, here's a set of keys, off you go. We will see carnage on the roads. And I don't think anybody could disagree with that.
So are you advocating dog licences then?
I'm not advocating a dog licence. A licence is pay your money and go. That's easy. What I'm saying is we believe that before you should have a dog, you should be able to say, I know the basics. I'm aware of the basic legislation. I understand the cost. I understand the basic health and welfare that I need to ensure my dog has. And that you understand the dangers and the basic canine behaviour. If you've got all those, you've got three groups of people when it comes to owning dogs. You've got the responsible ones who really pay attention and are quite involved in their dogs. You've got the middle group who are good people. They're nice owners, but they really don't have as much knowledge as maybe they should have. And then you have the minority who have a dog, don't know, don't care. You're never going to be able to do anything about that bottom group. But that middle group, and we see it an awful lot, they come through to us, they've had an incident. These are good people, but they didn't know. And it's too late then. It's happened. We should be getting these people beforehand. And we've seen people that have come through to us. I mean, one lady, case, had several dogs that she ended up having put down because she was said they were told to be pit bulls. She'd followed the myth of all bitches should have a litter, and she bred her two dogs. And she took them to the vet because she's actually a good owner, and the vet said they're all pit bulls, they need to die. She had them all destroyed because she thought she had no other choice. She came through to us afterwards. This lady now fosters for rescue dogs. All of her dogs are neutered. She's out there doing something proactive, and she understands that she shouldn't have done that and it was wrong, and she's up to date. We've brought her in line, and this is what we can be doing with everybody else.
Stan Rawlinson.
Okay, I specialise in dog aggression, both into dog and into human. Just happens I didn't mean to get into that. I like the little fluffy puppies, but it's happened, and I've got into that and I've written a lot about it. What I did find out, and what's really, really important, is there's critical periods in a dog's life. And if you get that dog socialised at a very young age, and the breeder knows what they're doing and handles the dog when it's still blind and deaf, and gets it so it really likes people in that way, and before the 16-week cut-off, and it's a very important time in a dog's life or a puppy's life, it's the same as a 5-year-old. 5-year-old, by the time you get to 5 to 5.5, you know right from wrong. Before that, you've got more chance of negotiating with a terrorist than you have of negotiating with a child. If you get that dog 16 weeks, which is the equivalent of 5 to 5.5 in human terms, and you socialise it, and you get it handled properly, and you mix it with other dogs, you're not going to have this aggression problem later. Nearly everyone I visit did not early socialise their dog. Don't get me wrong, you can have dogs that will get aggression later. Things like one-incident aggression, where they're walking along quite happily and another dog comes up and attacks them. And therefore that then becomes a fear response when any dog approaches. So you can do that. But if that happens, then you can get help. You can get people that are behaviourists and trainers that will be able to help you on that. But if you ignore it, it can then come very, very much worse. I'm not certain that dog control orders are going to be the end result, because the people that cause the most trouble will ignore them.
Would you like to respond to that?
Well, if they're introduced and a notice is served and you fail to comply with it, you would then be committing a criminal offence and the prosecution could then be brought. So if they ignore them, it would be at their own peril.
Stan?
The difficulty you got at the moment, we're not going to be going into a situation where every dog has got to be microchipped. And how do you find these people? They're out the park before you know it. I know lots and lots of dog attacks where the people will run out the park and no one knows where they live. And they will move from park to park as their dogs get worse and worse. They think it's clever for their dogs sometimes to attack other dogs or attack people. So I don't really believe that the dog notice will help that, because you've got to find the person first. And because we're not bringing a microchip in until, unfortunately, 2016, then even if we find a stray dog, we don't know whether that has attacked before or anything like that. But if we haven't, it's gone back to the owner and we find it again, then we can be done. And certainly if these people that are policing these control orders, that they will all have the machines to be able to check the microchips, and everyone will be registered at that time, but they won't afterwards.
A reminder that you're listening to The Voice of Russia in London. I'm Daniel Cinna. Joining me for today's discussion is Stan Rawlinson, one of Britain's leading dog behaviourists. Trevor Cooper is from the Dogs Trust. Ali Green is from DDA Watch. Dave Joyce is from the Communication Workers Union. We're also joined on the phone by Paul, who's been convicted under the Dangerous Dogs Act.
There is always going to be a level of non-compliance. It doesn't matter. But that's like, to say let's not do something because of that is like saying, well, we still have murders, so let's make that legal. That's crazy. You know, you're never going to catch everybody. The point of any legislation should be improve owner knowledge, reduce issues, and what they're planning at the moment isn't going to do that. Section 3 currently applies to public place, yet apparently the number of issues are increasing. So we're still missing something, and what we're missing is that vital education. They're not getting it before they even buy a dog. You know, we've got breeders out there that can breed any dog they like, sell it to whoever they like, give it to whoever they like. I could take a working collie and go and put it in a flat, and that's acceptable. It's not acceptable. We really need to stop messing about and stop dealing with things afterwards and start doing it before a dog's even been bred. Are we breeding from a dog whose temperament is worthy of being bred from? If I want to breed 2 nervous, aggressive dogs, I'm breeding a potential problem, but there's nothing to stop me from doing that.
There are concerns that people are using dogs as easy money-making opportunities at the moment.
Absolutely.
How do you want to see legislation govern breeders?
Well, our opinion is, at the moment, as I say, it's pretty easy. Anyone can breed any dog they like. We need to stop it. It's all very well saying, I mean, I think the new recommendations say if it's more than three or more litters a year, you have to be licensed as a breeder. That's a lot of dogs. You know, you can have an average of, say, 8 puppies a litter. You're talking 24 dogs a year that somebody is churning out. What we suggest is, if you would like to breed a dog, that's a privilege, it's a right. Your dogs, both the dam and the sire, must have health insurance. That safeguards the dam and the sire. Having a litter of pups can be expensive, so we think they should have health insurance. We believe they should sit a test. to prove they know the basics of breeding their dog. They understand about the whelping period, the whole issue. They know everything. They should also ensure that if they're breeding dogs who's a purebred dog, they have the health checks, and those health checks are clear so that they're not going to breed dogs that potentially could pass on hereditary disease.
That's a lot of tests for someone to go through.
It is a lot of tests, but all of these things will improve. We've got health insurance, which will help the dam of the pups. We've got a knowledge test for the owner, which will ensure that they're doing it properly. Potentially another thing we'd like is a personality test, basically, on the parents. Are they drivey? 1 to 5. If they are, it is something to help the potential owner that's coming to buy that puppy to say, look, here we go, this is a high drive, the mum is high drive, the puppies maybe. It's all about safeguarding the dogs and ensuring knowledge is correct. And there should be nothing wrong with that.
Trevor Cooper, would you agree from what you've just heard from Ali?
Well, I think we've got to get things into perspective. We have 8 million dogs in the United Kingdom. The actual vast majority of those dogs are well behaved. The vast majority of those dog owners are perfectly responsible dog owners. And we've got to be careful about pricing people out of being able to have a dog. We don't want to put barriers, unreasonable barriers, in the way. So these are interesting concepts, but I think we do have to have some caution if all we're going to be doing is adding to the financial woes of dog owners. Dog owners already pay a great deal in taxes in any event.
But owning a dog is expensive.
Why should it be even more expensive?
It's a privilege to own a dog. I mean, we've got to decide, what do we want here? Do we want to reduce dog attacks? Do we want to bring owner knowledge up? And to me, yes. I mean, certainly we want to bring that owner knowledge up. I speak to...
But the Dogs Trust do that quite effectively through their own education
Absolutely,
campaigns.
they do. But in the grand scheme of things, they're touching a small minority. We need to push everybody. As Trevor says, the vast majority of owners out there are great owners.
So is
They're
the
responsible.
answer giving more money to the Dogs Trust to do their education campaigns rather than having those extra levels of bureaucracy?
That's still only picking up those that want to do it. And, the biggest group, the people who are good owners but don't really know it all, they don't know that they don't know it all. That's the problem. It's not until an issue occurs that they think, and I mean, even now, say an incident occurs, they get a slap wrist, the dog may be put down, it may be restricted, the owner may be fined, but nobody says, did you realise what you did wrong? You didn't exercise the dog enough. You've got a high drivey dog and you're leaving it in a flat 24 hours, it's stressed out. Nobody's saying that. And then they can go on to have another dog at a later stage, and there's still no improvement because we're not saying why. We're not showing people what they've done wrong.
What's the answer then?
I firmly believe that what we need to be doing is getting people, like with a driving test, say, look, this is what you have to do. Here's the knowledge, take that and just show us that you know that knowledge. If you do, wonderful. Then you can go and own a dog. And I honestly, we have so many people that ring us up and I say, is your dog neutered? What do you mean?
Where some of these dogs are coming from, there was a case quite recently where they think rabies may be coming into the country because they're smuggling the dogs in from Southern Ireland. There's a perfect place. They can come in and out there without any restrictions whatsoever, yet there's no ban over there on any BSL or anything like that. One of the things we need to really look at is the puppy farm type of places that will just kick out dogs willy-nilly. Doesn't matter how aggressive the mothers are or the fathers, it doesn't matter anything. And all of these dogs are not handled when they're young, they're just left. And they are the ones that cause the majority of problems that I see. You go and buy yourself a dog from a pet shop and you can't see the parents and you can't see the person that breeds it, then you're making a big, big mistake. And you're going to be part of a statistic later that your dog could be attacking someone and you could find yourself on the other side of the law. Think before you buy a puppy. Think long and hard.
When it comes to educating more responsible breeders, what side of the fence do you fall on? Do you agree with Ali Green that we should be having dog licenses, dog insurance, or
I don't think dog licensing would be the answer in this situation. The reason being, all you're doing is putting the fiscal situation. You're not actually changing the person's perception of what they should be doing. They just have to go and buy a license, like buying a license for a car. So I can't see the point of that. And only the good owners will buy the licenses.
How do we crack down on these irresponsible breeders? What would you do?
I would shut all puppy farms down as of now. No mass breeding or anything like that. Everything should be registered through either. It can't all be registered through the Kennel Club because, of course, there's a lot of crossbreeds out there at the moment. In fact, they're very fashionable. Labradoodles, cockapoos. But that is happening all the time. But these are not being registered anywhere, and no one's checking the health of them. And I think there should be a permanent register for all dogs. That's not a problem.
But this is still adding a layer of bureaucracy, though, isn't it?
But it's not a big area of bureaucracy. Remember, the Kennel Club isn't a bureaucratic system. It's a system where people register their dogs that have been health checked, that have done this, have done that, have done it. How about all dogs that are being born just to be registered? Now, that isn't the same as having a licence. It's the same the dog is being registered.
Ali Green's looking a little bit disturbed over there.
How is that not the same as having a licence? I presume to register them you're going to have to pay a fee, and what you're saying is we just have a sort of database where we know all the dogs.
Yeah.
Isn't that pretty much what a licence is? You pay your fee and there's a database there that tells you who's got the licence.
Yeah, but you also have something to come back and say that dog was sold to that.
Okay, so we can add that in.
Well, let's go to our legal consultant.
Where did the licence come in? Where you had to put the breeder of the dog and everything else? You didn't. It's just a licence.
The difference between licensing and registration is that registration is a one-off, and that can be done quite effectively through compulsory microchipping.
Absolutely.
Whereas licensing would be an annual fee, which has no welfare benefit to the dog whatsoever.
But we still have a register here, and we're still saying where the dogs are. So if we can do that, which I'm not saying is a bad thing, it's not a bad idea at all to be able to trace a dog throughout its lifetime, see who's breeding them, and if we see breeder A is constantly turning out dogs that are nervous aggressive, we know we've got a problem to deal with. So that's not a bad thing. But if we can do that, why can we not give the owners the knowledge they need at the same time? So we ask them to study up. Nothing. We're not talking about, you must be brain boxing, you need to know all about genetics and everything in depth. We're asking for the basics. Are you aware of the basic health and welfare? Are you aware of the basic legislation? At the moment, they're not. And that's where we come in and start. If people really knew that your dog in a public place and potentially in future in your own home, that if your dog causes fear, that it doesn't need to hurt anyone, if people knew that, they would be much more aware and they would be much more cautious. That's a good thing. Most people don't know that, and if we can do a registration system, let's bring in that degree of knowledge. It's not difficult. We're not talking an awful lot of work. Most good owners have it already. We just need to bring the rest in line with everyone else.
So we're not talking about licence, we're talking about registration.
On a registration, and bring in the education with it.
I think he said that, and I'd like to bring that forward, not to 2016. I'd like to see that in 2013, where everyone's given a year, 2013 to 2014, given a year to have their pets microchipped. Remember, there's places like the Dogs Trust and varying others that are doing it for free. We're not talking about thousands and thousands of pounds people have got to spend that.
Any disagreements with that before we end?
Not disagreeing with anything. I mean, clearly we do a lot and we'll continue to do a great deal with the dog owners of the United Kingdom. We want compulsory microchipping to work. It's the starting point of responsible dog ownership. And there is no excuse to say you can't afford it. We will make sure that no dog owner gets left behind.
Well, unfortunately, we're out of time for today's discussion. Thank you to all of my guests. Dan Rawlinson is one of Britain's leading dog behaviourists. Trevor Cooper is from the Dogs Trust. Ali Green is from DDA Watch. Dave Joyce is from the Communication Workers Union. We're also joined on the phone by Paul, who's been convicted under the Dangerous Dogs Act.
We certainly warmly welcome compulsory microchipping. We agree with Section 3 of the Act being extended to cover all places, subject to exemptions. But frankly, we wish that it had gone further insofar as we would like to see breed-specific legislation gone, and we'd like to see the introduction of dog control notices.
Ali Green from DDA Watch.
Hi, we feel that, again, like the Dogs Trust, the breed-specific element should be repealed, but we feel that the legislation is still too late. We're doing very little to make sure that these incidents don't occur in the first place, and rather we're dealing with them afterwards, and we feel that more focus should be given to people before they buy a dog and before they breed a dog.
Dan Rawlinson, a dog behaviourist.
Yes, I agree with part of what they're suggesting. I'm also really against BSL, breed-specific legislation, for a number of reasons. I won't go into that at this moment in time. I do agree of the extension to dangerously out of control in a private place rather than a public place, because a lot of people get bitten under those circumstances. And I also believe in the microchipping. I think that's an excellent start.
Dave Joyce from the Communication Workers Union.
Well, certainly we welcome DEFRA's announcement. It's been a long time coming, but unfortunately it falls short of what we wanted to hear. And obviously let's not forget that this is a repeat of the announcement made by this minister's predecessor a year earlier. And of course we've had a number of false dawns and announcements and statements along the way, going right back to April 2010 when I secured a personal assurance from the Prime Minister David Cameron that they would make the changes that now just
far too limited. So with around 210,000 people attacked by dogs every year in England alone, has the government gone far enough to protect the public from dog attacks? Joining me for today's discussion is Stan Rawlinson, one of Britain's leading dog behaviourists and also an obedience trainer. Trevor Cooper is a legal consultant for the Dogs Trust. Ali Green is the founder of DDA Watch, who support fair and effective dog laws. Dave Joyce is National Health, Safety and Environment Officer for the Communication Workers Union. And he's also the leader of their Bite Back campaign, tackling dog attacks on postmen and women. We're also joined on the phone by Paul, who's been convicted under the Dangerous Dogs Act. We'll begin with Trevor Cooper, legal consultant for the Dogs Trust. Do you think the government plans were woefully inadequate?
I wouldn't go that far. It's a good start.
You're listening to the Voice of Russia in London. I'm Daniel Cinna. The British government's plans to protect the public from dog attacks is woefully inadequate, according to a group of MPs. The Environment, Food and Rural Affairs Committee say more needs to be done urgently against dog-related antisocial behaviour. Ministers want to bring in compulsory microchipping for every dog owner in England by 2016. They may also close a legal loophole so that dog owners could be prosecuted over an attack by their dog on private land. But the Environment Committee say the government's proposals failed to respond adequately to the issue, and the proposals were
talking about. Our number one objective has been to secure the extension of the legislation to private places, and our Bite Back campaign we launched in 2007-2008 has obviously been at the forefront of getting changes to the laws in Scotland, in Northern Ireland and Wales, and of course Westminster have been sadly trailing a long way behind. So
sure, and let's also hear from Paul, who's been convicted under the Dangerous Dogs Act. What do you think of the government's new plans?
I think at the end of the day, the owner is ultimately responsible. I don't think enough's been done legally at all. I don't know why they ever got rid of having dog licences.
Let's hear from Trevor Cooper, legal consultant for the Dogs Trust. What powers do enforcement authorities have, and what extra powers if the law does go through?
If the powers that are proposed are changed, they specifically relate though to England, and that is proposing that Section 3 of the Dangerous Dogs Act